Welcome to a Simple Therapy podcast. Real conversations, brave stories, and simple, soulful insights for therapists and anyone on a healing journey. I'm Sindee Gozansky, licensed therapist, supervisor, and a fellow human figuring it out too. Around here, we believe healing doesn't have to be complicated, and that leading with your heart still matters. We talk about what it really means to be human in and out of the therapy room. You'll hear from therapists, mental health professionals, and people courageously sharing their personal healing journeys. Because whether you're the therapist or the client, we're all human here. Let's keep it simple and keep showing up. Hello and welcome to a Simple Therapy podcast. Today, I'm so honored and excited to introduce you to my guest. His name is Keith Kurlander. Keith Kurlander, MA, LPC, is the co-founder of Integrative Psychiatry Institute, specializing in integrative mental health and psychedelic therapy education. He also co-hosts the Higher Practice podcast for optimal mental health and co-founded the Integrative Psychiatry Centers, a clinic transforming mental health care with innovative treatments. With over 20 years of experience as a psychotherapist and coach, Keith's mental health journey began after a near suicide at age 19 following a psilocybin experience. Now a successful entrepreneur, Keith is passionate about teaching methods that can eradicate mental illness and empower people to reach their full potential. As you start listening, I want to just let you know his website, psychiatryinstitute.com. And welcome to the podcast, Keith. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. It's not often that we get someone who's sharing their journey and then also sharing this, fabulous creation of supports and resources for people in the world of mental health and advancing into psychedelic education and research. So I'm really excited about all the directions we can go today.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I think it would be really great to start with where you started. Like, it sounds like a really tough experience as a teenager and then maybe some mental health ups and downs.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. I was a pretty philosophically oriented youngster. I was intrigued about the world and things, and I was also quite shy as a teenager on many levels. And so I was complex, I would say, just inside myself, as most teenagers are. But then what happened was I had done psilocybin for the first time. I was 19. I was in my dorm room after hanging out with a couple people alone. And I quickly became overwhelmed with feelings that felt very familiar to me, but never, they felt much more like direct and stronger than I had ever felt. And I got very overwhelmed. And then I sort of had like an epiphany almost. And it wasn't necessarily a positive epiphany of just like, wow, these feelings have been here for so long. And the feelings are just so devastating about myself, and just really more of a core energetic feeling of just despair. And then that drove me to the window in my dorm room. I was 190 feet up, 19 stories up, where I was at the window, like, I need to kill myself. Like, this has just been so painful all along. It's how it was sort of resonating in me. Like, oh, I've always been in this much pain. Finally, I have like the courage to just admit it to myself. And the only thing that stopped me was I started to hallucinate my 5-year-old sister, I had a 5-year-old sister, but I started to hallucinate her. And she basically was like, don't do this. You can't do this. Like, if not for you, for me. And it hit me, like, that whole process hit me so much that I just broke down. And I was like, I crawled away from the window and crawled back in bed. And then that kicked off this really intense journey for me. I mean, I went through I had a very hard year after that of pretty severe mental illness episode. And then on and off, just wrestled with mental illness for decades. Really, I was 19. Um, Discovering a lot of, I became a psychotherapist and made it my whole mission, but discovered a lot along the way. Like what was happening to me, and how do you, what do you do about it? And so that's kind of the story.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big story. I mean, I got, chills as you're talking about it, and also just that grief that you experienced, the fear and the dread and the despair. And, so many of us have either experienced something like that or been with our clients who have. Um, Thank you
Right.
for being vulnerable and making it real again. Like, I think
Yeah, of course.
we need for those stories, that reality to be real and in our face so we can keep doing this work, so we don't forget.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that also, I think what's so hard right now, when I was 19, yeah, maybe there were 1 in 15 or 20 people around me having that level of an experience. But now when you look at the data, it's like 1 in 3
Mm.
teenagers of that age are having that
Right.
experience. And that's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole separate conversation, but that's really scary.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
Exactly.
people need to hear stories of like, A, you're not alone, and B, there's something to do about it.
There's something to do about it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And the 1 in 3 is also without the psilocybin, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, the impetus to kill yourself is 1 in 3
Yeah. Yeah.
teenage girls.
Yeah.
That's
So
intense.
so intense, a huge crisis epidemic. And you're here on the cutting edge of integrative approaches to mental health, to recovery that probably you experienced yourself along the way. I imagine you had some maybe traditional or conventional approaches and then didn't really make much progress and tried something else. Could you speak to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, and I'm happy to go. I'll just follow your lead in terms of what you wanna kinda go
Yeah.
into.
Okay.
I at age 19, 20, 21, it was very much in the psychiatry, and psychoanalytic therapy realm for me. So I did that to start. Um, I felt a little better because I was on meds, but they, were actually making me a little hypomanic, and I didn't even know. Because back then, you know, that many years ago, we didn't know antidepressants actually, if you're prone to
Yeah.
hypomania, it's not a good fit.
Right.
So, there was that issue, but anyways, I went that route and I was feeling a little better, but then of course I was just in and out. I mean, what I'll say from just being someone who's taken meds now, multiple courses in this whole journey, like they're very useful at times, but they tend to not ever get to the bottom of the problem.
Mhm.
Very rarely do they help do that. You have to go do that. You have to have the impetus to go do that outside of you taking the
Yes.
meds. So anyways, there was that. But then in my 20s, my whole, process of working with this in my, like, mid-20s to early 30s was, yoga, spiritual
Oh,
meditation and
wow.
yoga. So I went very deep into that world,
Mhm.
by, like, age 22. Um, and so we could talk about that, but then I went deep into that world. I returned to the psychedelic world in my early 30s, in ayahuasca churches and things. And then I found integrative medicine in my late 30s. Um, and all along the way, there's psychotherapy mixed in different ways with this.
Mhm.
And then through all of that, I've integrated most of this stuff. Like I'm not on meds. I'm, I
Yeah.
don't have severe episodes anymore. Not that that will never happen again, but so
Mhm.
that's kind of so we could sort of talk about any of those or
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
great. Yeah, and I'm glad you're well and you're able to, like, you're so successful and you're really, like, helping so many people at so many in so many different, aspects, we keep saying integrative medicine. Please, like, define that in terms of how it is for you and the work you do in integrative medicine.
Yeah. So, that term is obviously used in multiple ways. Um, the way I'm using it isn't necessarily referring to the type of team members, because in medicine, you might say integrated or integrative care. You're usually talking about just different types of team members when you use those terms. But then there's this whole other world that uses the term to refer to looking at the whole body, in terms of, and outside of the body, and looking at it and like what holistically. And
Mhm,
so we're looking at what needs to be addressed. We're really trying to get the primary root causes of any condition. And we're using different tools to do that. And that's the integrative approach. It's like a root cause approach using all the tools at our disposal. And so in mental health, that would mean functional medicine is like a more narrow term, which is like looking at the way the systems in the body function. And are any of them in a state of disorder? And why are they in disorder? And can we get them back into a state of order? And so with mental health, that would include like the gut brain axis, your
mhm,
hormonal system, maybe your cardiovascular system to some degree, you're definitely your neurological system, your brain health system. And so we're looking at these different ways that these systems interact. And then there's different things to do, but foundational things are obviously nutrition, the fuel source you're putting into your body, and then can your body actually turn that fuel into the proper energy? The body systems are in disorder; it can't turn the fuel into proper energy. And in the United States, 2/3 of people can't turn the fuel into proper energy because there's
right.
metabolic disorder in this country.
Yeah.
Um, so that's integrative, and then we're also looking at trauma as a base kind of way of understanding um, mental health and the way the brain functions in more of the injured spectrum things. We're
Mhm.
looking at trauma in the nervous system, and then of course the psychology, the whole world of psychotherapy and psychology, and then how you're interacting with the world, so your environment and your relationships and things. So that's sort of the integrative approach. Is like, okay, we're gonna look at the whole picture, and we're
Yeah.
gonna identify what the root causes of this condition are, and then we're gonna start using these different tools, whether it's functional medicine or trauma therapy or whatever, nutritional
Uh-huh.
treatments to deal with it.
Right. So, as you say that, then the root cause could be located or root causes in any of those categories. Like maybe there's a functional root cause, physiological root cause, or the metabolic, condition, which could have arisen from something else. And then there's also trauma. And then, you know,
Hmm.
maybe something else, poor nutrition. Like those can all be
Yeah.
causes that then the symptoms arise from.
Yes, those are all we're gonna look at all of them, and if the mental health condition is significant enough, generally there's gonna be some issues along all of these things, if it's significant enough. But the one thing that is ubiquitous to almost all mental health conditions is trauma. It's not the only root cause, but the nervous system is on somewhat of a trauma spectrum, typically if you have a mental health condition. Um, so that would mean we'd have to define what trauma is to understand that. But I would say that's the one root cause that is typically there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think most of us who are mental health therapists see that and, you know, really have a respect for that. Can we all work with it? That's another question.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Totally.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And even as you're describing this, I realize, my notes aren't gonna be as helpful because there's so many inroads here.
Yeah.
Where does
I'm probably complicating the matter with
No, this is great. This is
yeah.
so interesting to me, and I mean, you know, personally, I also have a couple questions as I have some clients, looking into, different psychedelic approaches, but where does the psychedelic therapy fit into the integrative medicine?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Where does psychedelic therapy fit into treatment in
Yeah.
general? And um, psychedelic therapy is a intervention. It's a short-term intervention for long-term gain. But it's not psychedelic therapy typically is not really thought of as a long-term intervention.
Okay.
So it's a disruptive intervention. Much like you would be like, well, where does TMS fit in to an
Mhm.
intervention?
Mhm.
If someone was severely depressed and they've tried everything and they don't want to do ECT or something, right? So it's like it's an intervention that's used to, okay, somebody's stuck. Um, and I'm going to just talk about this question from the perspective of we're dealing with someone with a pretty significant mental health issue. Um,
Yeah.
so we'll start there. Um, it's used to hopefully gain fast results on their symptoms reduction and disrupt the way they're thinking about themselves in their life. And to hopefully get them to be more psychologically flexible in a fast way. And then the work begins. Once
Mhm.
that if that worked. Um, so it fits in as kind of like a rebooting the computer
Yeah.
is how it fits in. Like, let's reboot the computer.
Mhm.
Um, but then obviously a lot of work has to happen so the computer doesn't have its problem again.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say it that way. It's a reboot. Now, the one caveat to that, where it's maybe even a little more than the reboot, is with MDMA assisted therapy for trauma. Um, there are types of trauma, more single event or acute types of trauma, that you
Mhm.
might actually be able to just knock it out of the park in a few sessions with MDMA therapy, and that's behind you. Um, I wouldn't
Yeah.
say that for complex trauma. I mean, I think you can
Yeah.
definitely take a knock out of it, but you're still gonna have to do ongoing work. So I just want to add that one piece. Like, there's actually, MDMA therapy is being studied on, single event trauma. So
Mhm. Yeah,
not
I
only,
think
but yeah,
that's really, makes a lot of sense, and I think we have some corollaries, for other maybe traumatic approaches, trauma therapy approaches like brain spotting or
yeah,
EMDR where,
right,
or a single traumatic event may respond in fewer sessions with that kind of approach. And, I I don't know that therapists or the general public is so aware that it's more of a short-term disruptive treatment versus long-term because I don't think it's clear. I think we're getting so many mixed messages about psycho it's how do psychedelic therapy. We're getting a lot of
yeah,
mixed messages.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of people don't know what it is. I mean, a lot
Mhm.
of therapists don't know much about it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Now that's changing pretty quickly, right now in the last even 3 years. A lot more people know more about it, but it's still pretty new, right? But I think it is important to understand, like, psychedelic therapy is typically 1 to 6 sessions,
Mhm.
depending on the medicine and the treatment course. And so that's not a long-term treatment. Like, it's meant
Right.
to really alter someone's way very quickly and hopefully give them relief very quickly. And then there has to be a process that keeps happening for that person, or it's not going to change them. I mean, there are studies that show that it can change certain things forever, potentially, of like your worldview
Mhm.
aspects of it, specific spiritual experiences and how that impacts person. But overall, no, the work really begins after in some ways. I mean, I think the hardest thing about doing psychedelic therapy specifically is you go back to your life, and the average person isn't surrounded by people that understand psychedelic therapy. So you go back and you're just like, whoa, this happened to me and nobody understands you. That's hard. So we used to have some groups for that. We had some integration groups for people to sort of, if we're talking just about psychedelic therapy.
Yeah, and so with that, the integration piece, um what happens if a therapist is working with a client? The client goes, actually, this is something that's happening to me. The client goes and has a psychedelic therapy treatment and maybe is also working with a therapist from that facility. But does the regular therapist provide any integration, and how can they do that without the training in psychedelic education?
I think they're gonna want some training,
Okay.
but I think they're gonna wing it before that.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with your therapist. You got to work with
We
a
wing it all the time.
person's, and yeah, you're winging it every day, and like people got to bring material that you have to sort of work with, right? So
Right.
now they're
It's the
bringing
fun part.
material. Yeah. So now they're bringing like, oh, psychedelic, but you would want education because working with psychedelic therapy integration is there's a lot to know there.
Yeah.
There's a lot to understand about is a person actually getting a little hypomanic, not in the clinical sense. Is a
Mhm.
person leaving the experience with inflated ideas about themselves? Do you have to sort of track that and help them out of that? Are they leaving with deflated ideas that I'm familiar with that space and understanding why that's happening and how to help them with that. Are you, are you helping them bridge the experience
Yeah.
so that it doesn't just stay an experience in time, but it becomes an actual part of their life? Do you know how to do that?
Right.
Can you relate to the experience at all on any level? So I there's a broad spectrum of things to just kind
Yeah.
of understand about the different things that can happen in psychedelics therapy, and or if you had a client that used psychedelics recreationally, you could kind of go there. I mean, before I knew anything, I was already, a lot of people found me because of my history,
Mm.
not for dosing sessions, but for integration of their psychedelic experiences, starting 20 plus years ago when I was out of school. People were finding me because I had a lot of my own experiences that I also had to make sense of.
Right. And you could relate
So
to that. And I've
I
gotta
could
say,
relate.
Keith, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've just gotta say, like, what you just shared about helping a client integrate and the amount of education and training is really helpful. The inflation or deflation of their experiences or their mood, and also, how do you incorporate it into their life so it's not just an experience? Most of us wouldn't even realize those are pieces. And then the relating part. So people have come to you for years because they also knew you could relate to them and that
Totally.
experience.
And
Yeah.
that's a great part too to have. And I think that at this point, um, I mean, I'll say it. I don't know. We'll see if it's true, but I think, 5 to 7 years from now, every therapist, they don't need to practice psychedelic therapy by any means. But if they don't have any education, like, you're going to have clients that you don't know what to say to in 5 to 7 years from now, because in 5 to 7 years from now, it's very likely that psychedelic therapy will become somewhat mainstream and based on FDA approvals. And like, you're going to get people that are trying to integrate their experiences with you, as even if you're not a psychedelic therapist. So if you have no education, you're going to feel it. And I think that, hopefully 5 to 7 years from now, grad schools are at least including a course on it so that you have some
Right.
education.
Well, that's a big ask. I mean, I work with
Yeah.
grad students and they're missing a lot of courses.
Yeah, I
But
know.
I
But
mean,
that won't happen. But, but most of a lot of
yeah,
our practical education happens post grad anyways. Like, you go to this institute, you go to this
100%.
training.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think that psychedelic therapy education, whether you actually want to work with medicines directly, um, is going to
Mhm.
become a very important requirement for therapists to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that happens. Um, where do you see this momentum happening in the industry and in the US? Like, where do you see this momentum, like 5 to 7 years?
Well, where we are currently is that so right now, we have ketamine
Mhm.
is used predominantly off label, like generic ketamine, um, is used across the country and in many other countries through legal medical channels, and then a therapist gets paired into the situation somehow. And we could go into all that, but how
Yeah.
that actually works. But so
Right.
ketamine is available. I mean, I was just talking to someone in the Philippines randomly on a call for work related stuff, and she was like, "Yeah, I know about ketamine," and so like this is becoming very well known, and not recreationally. I'm talking medically and mental health. So they have that. So that's accessible in different ways. Psilocybin is now only accessible through state measures in Oregon and Colorado in the US. And that's, still federally illegal. And then we are hoping we'll have approval by 2027 at the FDA if one of the um, two main companies that are close in their phase 3 trials, if one of them gets an approval. That could
Mm.
be as early as 2027. So that's not far away, a year and a half.
Right. Right.
And then MDMA got rejected last August 2024 by the FDA. But there is a lot around that rejection. And so we may see that approval in the next year and a half also. Um, so those are the three big main medicines to keep our
Yeah.
eyes on. So in 5 to 7 years, we could be seeing,
Yeah.
your neighbors saying, "I just used my health insurance and I just had psilocybin therapy or MDMA therapy." I think that is a more than likely scenario of what you're going to hear in 5 to 7 years from your neighbor,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is a
Thank
big
you for
deal.
sharing that. It is a big deal. It
And it's
is.
not a panacea. We would want to talk about that too,
Mhm.
but it's a major tool that we need at this point,
Yes.
accessible.
Yes. Exactly. It's really a gift to hear this from somebody who has like, in the trenches experience, and there's so much promise there. I mean, I feel your hopefulness about it, Keith.
Yeah. There's a
Yeah.
lot of promise there, and we definitely need um, this tool before we have better tools.
Yes.
We'll
Right.
have some good tools, but they're decades away.
Mhm.
But this is going to be the best next tool.
Did you know 1 in 5 people will experience a mental health issue this year? That's why I created Mental Health Threads, to spread awareness and break the stigma around mental health. At mentalhealththreads.etsy.com, you'll find a collection of inspiring and fun products, from t-shirts and hoodies to mugs, hats, candles, and more, all featuring positive messages that encourage self-care and mental well-being. Best sellers like Go to Therapy, Love Wins, and Still Here are fan favorites, along with our signature semicolon designs and Pride collection. Therapists especially love our exclusive items like Licensed Listener and Professional Secret Keeper. Our mission is to spark important conversations and remind you that you are not alone. If you're ready to make a statement and support mental health, head on over to mentalhealththreads.etsy.com today. Let's make mental health a priority together. Well, we're always looking for that, right? The best
Yeah.
next step that we can take and the best next tool. And we only want that, like improved well-being, not just mental health, but overall health for everyone. I mean, that makes everything so much better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
how we
sure.
relate to each other and our families and our friends and our world.
Yeah, for
Mm,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Your clinic then is doing education, and if anybody goes to it, it's psychiatryinstitute.com, and there's so many offerings. Tell us a little bit. We're not the end, but I want to know
Sure.
about how you're training um, providers.
Yeah. So we started 7 years ago. We started specifically in integrative medicine education for mental health. We started with an integrative medicine fellowship. So that was
Mm.
predominantly psychiatrists, nurse practitioners, physician assistants that wanted to learn how to provide integrative medical services to their patients. And then that was the beginning. And we knew there was other things. We did other iterations of more integrative trainings. We have a personalized medicine program, nutritional psychiatry program. And then we moved into psychedelic therapy, which we had always known we would. So then we now have psychedelic therapy training. Um, it's probably the largest training in the world. We've trained thousands of people. It's only for licensed professionals, so either therapists or on the medical side.
Hmm.
Um, so that's what we do. So we're a continuing education company. We specialize in, root causes for mental health issues. And so far that's what we focused on in terms of training needs.
Yeah. And are there like a college, are there like windows to get into these trainings?
Some trainings are fully self-study now. And
Hmm.
then, but the psychedelic therapy training at this moment is the only one where there's windows twice a year, but registration is always happening.
Yeah.
So
Well.
the registration windows are always open, but the cohorts start twice a year.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Hmm. Fascinating. Um, and for a client who wants to, find a psychedelic therapy, like what do you recommend? I mean, obviously it varies state to state or wherever somebody is in terms of like, you know, let's say vetting the agency or the provider. What should they really be looking for?
So they're likely looking at ketamine, unless we're
Yeah.
talking about underground stuff, which we shouldn't talk about right now because it's not really who we're talking to. So
Right.
that's a whole different world. But let's just talk above ground. So it's likely ketamine, unless they're looking in Colorado right now. Um,
Hmm.
for a mental health provider for psilocybin. But outside of that, it's ketamine and outside of clinical research. So then for ketamine, yeah, I mean, I think you want to know that your provider has been trained. Um, and like you want to ask about that. Um, you want to see what their training has been and did they, learn about this in a day because they took like a 4-hour online course and they're calling
Yeah.
themselves trained, or did they actually do some extensive training? And that matters, I think. Um, so that's, I think the main thing is I would want to know more about their training and their views on this. And in terms of where to find these people,
Hmm.
I mean, at this point, most states, you can Google and find people. Word of mouth is always best in the mental health world. Um, our website has some listings on it too. Um,
Yeah.
there's psychedelic support. There's a website. They have a lot of the big directory on there too.
That's great.
Yeah.
I really think the training matters so much, especially as you talk about what the therapist or the provider needs to do, afterwards to help with the integration piece. And that kind of training takes a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes time and
Yeah.
I think as long as they have some level of training that, you feel good about, it's a good starting point. And then obviously what matters most is how you feel about them as an individual. I mean, at the end
That's
of the
right.
day, you have to trust the person and
Yeah.
it's a very vulnerable space to be in. So you better make sure you trust the person.
Yeah. Beautiful. If that's your true therapist self coming out, it's
Yeah.
always relational. And do you trust the person?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
So, how do we link this? Because most people say, all right, well, if you're having a psychedelic experience, maybe there's a spiritual piece or a sacred or divine or a oneness type of experience that somebody has. How are you seeing this integration of like spirituality and medicine, mental health, that whole thing?
Yeah. I mean, this is a fun topic on some level for me.
Yeah, me too.
Well, let me ask you, I'll answer it, but like, is this a part of your work? Is like the spiritual aspect? Are you working with clients? I actually haven't asked much about you.
That's okay.
Yeah.
The spirituality is definitely a big part of my work and my life approach. I don't think I could be a therapist without having and I'm not talking religion. I'm talking some spiritual foundation.
Yeah.
Um, some kind of practice also. I think that's very important. Um, I would say client-wise, it's a mix. So, I don't know if that answers your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think that, when with psychedelic therapy, what's interesting about it is that there's, there's mm, a higher chance that it's just gonna go there, um, more often than just in, ordinary consciousness therapy. So that's interesting, right? So you sort of it's gonna the person, not every time, but more often, again, than ordinary consciousness therapy, they're gonna just enter into a spiritual experience that they want to share about, or mystical experience, you could say.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's interesting because like that, just the foundation of the therapy encounter becomes typically more often spiritual, in terms of like recognizing it as spiritual, for the client. And the therapist might always recognize it as spiritual.
Mhm.
Um, and then also the other thing that happens that very rarely happens in ordinary therapy is actually having a deep, profound mystical experience in the moment of the therapy. It doesn't
Right.
happen that often in ordinary therapy where someone just goes into a peak experience of some kind and starts sharing about it. So
Mhm.
that's very cool and
Yeah.
different. So that's just a part of psychedelic therapy, which is that people are gonna, have either for their first time in their life or they've had some before where they're actually having mystical experiences that are so profoundly impactful, and you're right there to witness it.
Mhm.
Um, and that is incredible. And then what is that? How does that impact change or therapeutic change? It's all, I mean, many people, if you look at some of the research, will say that that spiritual experience that they had is one of the most important experiences of their entire life.
Right.
Um, how does it change them? It could change them through having more compassion for self or others. It could change them through having a higher level of transmorality, meaning being able to hold moral differences between people, which also can increase compassion,
Yeah.
understanding both sides. Um, it could help them not feeling alone,
Mm.
inside of themselves in a way that they've never experienced before. They could have a profound inner connection to nature they never had before and feeling more connected as a physical organism to the natural world. Um, on and on. They can have an
Yeah.
experience of death, um, and actually sharing about that experience that, maybe they weren't gonna die, obviously, but that
Mhm.
they went through the experience of it, or a near-death experience was sort of, catalyzed, even though if it wasn't really a near-death experience. And that can be life-changing, what someone does after feeling closer to death,
Yeah.
and how, and that can happen in life in other ways, obviously, with illness
Exactly.
or a car
Right.
accident. Um, so there's so many things that happen,
Mhm.
on the sort of spiritual connection level, God, and then it could also be about a reorganization around how they're relating to their own identified religion.
Mhm.
Um, Lots of things there. That's
So
really
rich.
cool and rich and fun and engaging and sometimes scary as hell for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, what a witnessing privilege for the therapist who's part of that. As you describe these things, we get a sense of like how incredible it could be for the client. Imagine it's pretty incredible for the therapist. I mean, you've done that, Keith. And what is the impact? I mean, I'm asking you to generalize, but what's the impact on you being part of that when the spiritual experience comes up?
I think that you have the experience alongside them in your own way is what
Mhm.
happens typically. I mean, it's not the same thing that's vicarious, but it's,
Yeah.
you're in a space where something different's happening, um, on the social engagement systems of the two people, like, because there's a different type of engagement happening.
Yeah.
And so you get altered also, and I think in general, you just get altered around being around. I think other therapists could probably relate to this, even if it's not just psychedelics. Like if you've ever had a client that has come in altered and something's off and they don't, but you're like, you start feeling altered sometimes around the presence of someone that's altered. But this is, the spiritual context. Like you typically, as a therapist, I think you often will start to have your own experience with
Yeah.
them. And
Yeah.
that's a great secondary gift to the whole thing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And it also reminds me, like we're always saying, our clients give us so much, sometimes more than we give them, and that's just another example. And I think many of us have been touched or moved or even changed in some way from regular conventional therapy.
Yeah.
Imagine this kind of therapy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and both will change you, right? Because you also, in regular therapy, even just the whole transference process
Mhm.
will change you,
Yeah.
of what you have to work with there. But yes, really, I mean, the other thing is you see things that you don't understand. I mean, and that happens in therapy, but this happens like in such a big way around like existential things people are talking about that you either don't understand or it's just like profound to hear
Mhm.
another person's wisdom come through. And
Wow.
that's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I imagine, you can be open to that healing for yourself as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think if you're going to do psychedelic therapy for the administration, the dosing sessions, then you have to be up for that because it will also change you.
Yeah.
So you have to be up for that work.
Right. Yeah, and those are parts of the education process that your centers offer.
Yeah. Yeah. And and then on the flip side of all that, sometimes it could be really boring. You don't know what's going on for someone for an hour.
Right.
You're just sitting there, they're in their world and you don't even know what's going on. So there's
Yeah.
that whole piece too of like,
Right.
can you handle that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also we were joking about, well, you're winging it all the time, but you just don't know what you're gonna be asked to handle.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's part
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else that comes up around like this intersection of mental health and spirituality that you want to
Well, I
share?
think sure. I mean, I think there's something we could talk about. It just was like, what is the difference? What's a mental health issue, and what's a spiritual issue, and what is that? What's the overlap, and what are we even talking about? And
Yeah.
um, I think that when we think about spiritual technologies over time for spiritual growth, meditation, um, hatha yoga, other contemplative practices, contemplative inquiry practice, whatever it is. There's
Mhm.
spiritual technologies that have existed now for thousands of years. Um, and the question is, well, why are those technologies different than, say, the psychotherapy tradition, or what are we trying to do different there? And I think there's a lot of overlap when we start to dive into trauma psychology, that those traditions are actually the underpinnings of any solid bottom up trauma psychology approach, based in those traditions where we're working with the nervous system essentially,
Yeah.
directly trying to get to the nervous system. So, and then it's interesting. So it's like, well, so here we have spiritual technologies that are working with the nervous system, very directly, trying
Mhm.
to put it into deeper states of relaxation and uncouple associations of threat. And that's what these traditions are doing.
Yeah.
But the difference, a little bit of the difference is, well, what's the intended outcome? And so then it depends on the spiritual tradition and practice you're looking at. But sometimes the intended outcome might be um, more of a transpersonal outcome in the spiritual traditions of, um, maybe we're trying to be either enter a unity state of consciousness, or we're trying to um, get outside of ourselves in a way where we can be okay
Yeah.
with anything happening in our lives, and um, non-attached.
Unattached. Yeah.
Yeah,
Non-attached. Yeah.
non-attached to the outcomes. But in the mental health space, that's not entirely the same focus.
Mhm.
In the mental health space, there are some therapists that are drawn to working with their clients around non-attachment. But in the mental health space, we're looking more, I think, at integration of being in the world. Um, and how do we become more integrated into being in the world? How do we have a broader spectrum of experience? How can we have a fuller bandwidth of emotion? How can we relate better to people? That wasn't really the heart and soul of spiritual technology, historically, in my opinion, was those matters. Um, so, but I think but I think they're very related,
Right. Yeah.
and they inform each other.
Absolutely. And it's really helpful to hear kind of how you can conceptualize those differences. And one or the other is like it's not bad, right or wrong, bad or good, but there are clear differences. The integration versus
Yeah,
that
there's
unity
yeah,
or
yeah,
non-attachment.
yeah. I should add an extra piece here, because when I was talking about the spiritual technologies, I'm talking more about the mystical branches within different traditions that lead to contemplative practices and things. But the religious traditions are there to create a more integrated way of being in the world. I mean, they're set up. Not
Right.
not saying they always
That's
produce the
separate.
outcome we want,
Right.
but they are designed for that.
For the
Um,
integration. Although
yeah,
I mean, we could we could debate about
yeah,
this, but then there are pockets within that, within those institutions where there might be a time that somebody is meant to go higher, right? Meant to have a greater
yeah.
spiritual experience from, we've
Oh,
seen
yeah.
different traditions with using fasting or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, most of the spiritual like the contemplative practices and things come from religious traditions and the
Yeah.
mystical branches, but many do. But with that said, the religious traditions are set up for how do you become more integrated in our lives and be more fulfilled, and
Uh-huh.
but there's a lot there. I mean, it comes with a lot of dogma and telling you how it should be, and it doesn't often lead to a more integrated sense in oneself. I mean,
Right.
it's a
Yeah.
lot of people in therapy are trying to undo some of the problems they have with their religion,
Ah, for
but
sure.
there's good and bad in everything. So I'm not
Yeah.
knocking religion, because I
Right.
think there's plenty of places where people really thrive in religious
Yeah. We're
institutions.
just knocking the dogma and the baggage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, Keith, as you describe that, I think for the individual too, it can really create, some confusion. I know I've experienced that myself with, what's going on? Is it depression? Is it some other like spiritual lack or, like absence or disconnection that I'm feeling? Like what's happening? And then you also look at the integration piece and all of that. Like to me, that's a really fascinating kind of self awareness exploration piece.
Yeah. And I think mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, if we just take the two sort of broad, biggest kind of categories, those obviously are going to have existential components to them that would show up in a spiritual conversation. Um, so they're going to have existential components to them. When we get into a more nuanced conversation of like, are these like a spiritual illness, like Kundalini rising or something, or like a
Mm,
Kundalini illness, or like, to me, that is all interesting and very speculative. But however we frame this stuff is somewhat speculative at the end of the day. But it's theoretical, and it's like if you're trying to be like, well, is this person having a Kundalini illness or bipolar disorder? It's like, well, at the end of the day, it's like what framework is going to help this person heal. That's what matters. But
Yeah.
I don't think there's like some objective truth of like that's Kundalini illness and that's not like either way,
Right.
we're just putting a framework on top of something. But we want to get to the practices and the
Mhm.
things that are going to help the person integrate. So
Yeah.
if it works for a person, like okay, the whole Kundalini framework, this is one example of just if that works to help a person move along, great. Then it's just as
Mhm.
true as, labeling this as a bipolar framework that,
Yeah.
it helps the next person through that path of frameworks. So I think that's important. I do think there are some phenomena that we don't want to just kind of disregard in the psychotic realm and things that
Right.
like we want to, at least as a provider, I think, give them some frameworks that seem to have some weight in them, and we don't want to just blow it off. But, outside of that type of situation, I think like whatever framework works for the client is what's going to be most useful that they actually get somewhere with, that they're not creating new stories that aren't true. And
Mhm.
I don't know if this is
Yes.
making sense, but
I It is, and I think it's also how can we be open to another framework, right? That's
yeah,
a big challenge.
right.
So, that's something that you've really talked about, and I think that the integrative approach also provides.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's like as a provider, what are we open to?
Yeah.
Or and it's also a good point because it's like as a provider, we checked our biases at all, about what we've learned and been told. Have we actually look critically at them? How true is this framework of, diagnosing someone with depression or anxiety? How true
Yeah.
is that framework? What does it mean to do
Yeah.
that? And let's say you've bought into the framework, but what does it really mean to buy into the framework? Does it mean that uh, that these symptoms are coming from what? Genetic
Yeah.
issues? Like, what does it mean? What do
Yeah.
we do with that?
And how do we slow down enough to say, "Okay, you do have these symptoms, and there's also some root causes to look at," which I think
Yeah,
our world is such a quick fix world that people do focus on the symptoms. They're kind of trained to do that, clients and
yeah,
therapists.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think yeah, and that is an evolution. And there was some benefit in getting reductionistic, right? To a medicalized model of being like, if you have symptom cluster, we're going to call it depression, and we're going to research drugs that seem to, reduce the symptoms. And there was some real benefit in that. But I think we've also sort of created a cycle of the quick fix mentality and not getting to the root cause. And we're very
Yeah.
focused on symptoms and in our lives now.
Right,
um,
right.
and that's,
Yeah.
where we are. But and there was, a lot of amazing discoveries in medicine happened through reductionism and focusing in that way. But we've also created some new problems.
Yeah, yeah, and, to what you said at the beginning, sharing with us your story, and you had medications that helped, and then you realized there was still more healing to happen, and, you found other things that, like you said, spiritual tools and integrative medicine approaches that really helped, and I hope listeners are also hearing that, right? Like, there are so many other things that are out there, and we're not just physical, right? We are spiritual beings. We're, whatever else you use to describe one, but we're more than
Right.
just, you know, these bodies.
Totally. I
Yeah.
think what I would want everybody to hear is, that pretty much every human has a puzzle in them that they haven't figured out. And we think we're alone in that when we're really suffering.
Yeah.
Anybody that's really ever suffered significantly from a mental health struggle, ultimately you feel unique inside of yourself around the struggle. You're like, no one can really tell me how to fix this. I don't know what the hell's really wrong with me here. I'm spinning my wheels inside myself, and it feels, lonely and unique. And what's unique is that yes, your puzzle has its own unique tapestry. But what's not unique is that the next person next to you and the therapist you're talking to has a puzzle in them that they haven't solved either. And so, I think that's really important for people to understand. And you hopefully are going to be with a provider that has been committed to working with that puzzle in themselves. Because if you have, they're going to have a lot of good tools for you.
Yeah.
Um, but no one's solving the puzzle, or else you're dead. You're not you're
Right.
not human anymore.
Yeah.
Human being is about it's a puzzle to be a human.
Yeah.
And if you've been successful along the way, you're in a state of gratitude
Mm.
about it all.
Mm.
But the puzzle's not going away.
The right, the puzzle might morph a little bit. There's always something there.
It's puzzling to be alive.
Mm. Yeah.
It's like, what? How did that happen?
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
Keith, that was so beautiful. Such wisdom that you just shared with us about our humanity, our shared humanity as clients, as therapists, as individuals, and bringing it all back to gratitude and how we can carry that with us and see the other person as also carrying this puzzle and in need of healing or working on their own healing. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am just educated myself. Some of my biases have been checked because of the education you shared with us today, and I'm really grateful for that, Keith, and for what you're doing. And I definitely want people to be able to find you online and in all of the places where you're sharing this education. So maybe take another minute and let people know where they can find you and the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the main place to come is psychiatryinstitute.com. And that's the Integrative Psychiatry Institute's home. And there's a lot to check out there. You could check out our podcast, the Higher Practice podcast. There's a lot of history in there. We don't have episodes at the moment, but we will again.
oh, but they
Um,
have a ton of episodes there.
yeah,
Fabulous, amazing guests. It's next level. So definitely check that out. We'll link
yeah.
to
So
both.
cool. So I think those are the two primary places.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Great. Well, thank you again, Keith, for sharing your heart and your wisdom and your
Thank you.
expertise and your experiences with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great
Yeah,
to chat with you.
it's been great. Thank you
Yeah.
also to our listeners. And until next time, let's keep it simple and keep showing up. Thanks for listening to a Simple Therapy podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who needs it. Your support means so much. You can learn more or get in touch at asimpletherapypodcast.com. And remember, let's keep it simple and keep showing up.